Morning. Firstly, I want to say to Mustafa, Tashikulash for, yes, I speak Turkish, yes, for a wonderful speech, and it's extremely enlightening. And I'm afraid now the second-class performance begins. For 2 years, I had to go to church once a week for hymn practice when I was in school in England. Every Wednesday, I would go to the chapel and sing hymns. Didn't make me a Christian. I enjoyed it. Some of the songs were pretty cool. I prayed in Turkey in the Blue Mosque, and I had no idea what was happening. It was Friday prayers, but you know, the methods were different in the sense that the number of Sunnah prayers were different from what I was used to, and you know, but I just followed along, and you know, eventually it was okay. It was cool. And in Turkey, they bring their shoes inside, right? Because you know, over here we are a bit more pragmatic. We never wear nice shoes to the mosque, right? It's foolish. You know, you wear your most awful slippers, and if it gets stolen, it's okay. You just take someone else's. All right. So you know, I had these kinds of experiences. I once went to a mosque near my house when I was studying in London. I found out there was a mosque within walking distance, so I said, okay, I'm going to go one Friday, and I'm going to go there. And I don't know why, but in many countries, you know, people get suspicious of me when I go into a mosque. I guess it's the long hair, the biker jacket. You know, they don't know who I am, right? So I went to this mosque in my long hair and my black leather jacket, and someone stopped me and said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I'm here to pray." I said, "Oh, okay." So they let me in, and I had no idea. I think it was a Shia mosque. I had no idea. So the congregation came in, and they were all dressed in robes. They all dressed the same, and they started to pray, and I just followed along, and they didn't stop. They just kept on going up and down, up and down. You know, I'm wondering what the heck, you know. But you know, it's too late now. I'm in it, you know. So I was following along, and eventually, someone very kindly said to me, "It's over now. You can go home." I said, "Oh, thank you." So you know, my point is that you know, there's so many. It's so varied. Spiritual life is so varied, and in its variety, you can find beauty. You know, anywhere, even within your own faith, there is so much variety. And if you do not have the freedom to follow what you want to follow, then your spirituality is meaningless. Anyway, I'm not a religious scholar, as so many people from Abim have pointed out. So let's talk a bit about history and the law. Historically in our country, Orthodox religious authorities have always worked to maintain the status quo. They've always worked hand in hand, and of course the status quo has changed over the years. So in the 19th century and the early 20th century, the status quo was basically the royal family, the royal families. Sorry, I forget. Yeah, we have many. The royal families and the aristocracy, and we can see that in our history, for example, with the I wouldn't say conflict, but the differences in ideology between the kaum muda and the kaum tua. Yeah, the kaum muda were the progressives, and the kaum tua were the orthodoxy. These were religious thinkers, and the kaum tua supported the royalty. They supported the aristocracy. They supported the social hierarchy as it stood. Therefore, politically, there has always been a relationship between religion and the ruling classes in this country. I submit. This relationship, it waxes and wanes. You know, sometimes it becomes more important, sometimes it becomes less important. You know, so for example, let's take UMNO. Yeah, when UMNO first started, they were not particularly religious. I don't know whether they are now, but you know, when they first started, they were not particularly interested in religion until the Maria Herzog case. Yeah, so you guys are familiar with the case, right? Where the little Dutch girl was raised by a Muslim family. The Dutch family left her with the Muslim family because of the war, the Second World War, and she was raised as a Muslim girl. Then after the war, the Dutch family came back and then took her away. And it was very traumatic for her, it was very traumatic for her adopted family. And the court held in favor of the Dutch family, causing a lot of anger and protests and riots in Singapore by the Muslim community. And UMNO realized, oh, hold on, religion can have a powerful role to play in politics. So they created an Islamic wing, a division, a little Islamic department, And it didn't take long for this little Islamic department of UMNO to become disillusioned with UMNO. And so they left and they became their own political party, which is PAS. So, UMNO is, they are responsible for PAS. Thank you very much. My point is that this cynical relationship between the holders of power and the so-called religious authorities is important. And I mention it because it has relevance to post-independence development in the country as well, which is where we are today. So that's a bit of history, early 20th century. Then, as you know, in 1957, we became independent, and one of the important developments which came with our independence is our constitution, because our constitution is what determines how this country is run, how this country is governed, etc. Now, what does our constitution say about the secular status of this country? Is it a secular country? Is it an Islamic state? What is it? It's problematic. Yeah, our constitution is problematic, partly because we do not have a preamble. Yeah, there's nothing in our constitution. There's no statement of general principles or idealism in our constitution. The constitution begins with Article 1, which says, this federation shall be known as Malaysia. That's it. It's not an interesting constitution, yeah? It is a very dull, very unromantic constitution, They had the chance, just some sort of statement, something really cool. No, this federation shall be known as Malaysia. Anyway, the problem with our constitution is Article 3. And Article 3 reads thus: Islam is the religion of the federation, but other religions may be practiced in peace and harmony in any part of the federation. So, what does this mean? Does this mean that Malaya, as it was then, was to be an Islamic state? The answer, and who knows what an Islamic state is, yeah? But anyway, is this what it means? Well, the answer, I believe, is clearly no. And I say so for two reasons. Firstly, let's look at the Reid Commission report. Now, the Reid Commission was the body entrusted with drafting our constitution. And in their report, they were getting feedback from the stakeholders of the time as to the contents of the constitution. Article 3 of the constitution wasn't something which was put in by either the Malay rulers or by the political parties of Malaya at the time. Article 3 was put in by the Pakistani member of the Reid Commission. He was the one who says, put this in. In fact, at the time when they put it in, the sultans were a little bit worried about it. Okay, they were not very comfortable with it. But anyway, the important thing I want to point out here is what the alliance said. And the alliance, of course, were the three major political parties which made up the Malayan government at the time, which is UMNO, MIC, and MCA. And upon examining the draft constitution, they said this about Article 3. The observance of this principle shall not imply that the state is not a secular state. Yeah? The observance of this principle shall not imply that the state is not a secular state. It's so clear. This, and of course, if you read a law, if the law itself doesn't give you any hint as to what it's supposed to mean, you can always look into the preparatory works for that law. And the preparatory works of our Constitution is in the Reid Commission report. Okay? So So when Mahathir Mohamad in the early 2000s, declared that Malaysia is an Islamic state, where on earth did that come from? It has no validity. It has no validity in our constitution. All right, it's just one man's statement. And of course, after that, what's his name? Najib. Sorry, forgot. Najib says that, we've never been a secular state. Okay? And these are statements from our prime ministers who, obviously are not lawyers, but never mind. So it is very clear, therefore, that Malaya was not to be an Islamic state, whatever that might mean. This is not an assertion by the Reid Commission. It is an assertion made by the very people who will to become the government of our newly independent nation. This statement, combined with Article 4, which places all laws in the country under the overarching principles of the Constitution, means that to claim Malaya was meant to be theocratic in any way is disingenuous. Now, the contention that Malaya, or Malaysia as it became, is a secular country is further strengthened by the decision of the Supreme Court, which is the highest court in the country, now known as the Federal Court, in the case of Cik Omar Cik Soh, where it was held that the secular law governed the nation and Islamic law was confined to the personal laws of Muslims. Article 3 was taken to mean that as far as official ceremonial matters are concerned, Islamic form and rituals are to be used. And this case has not been overruled. So, from a legal perspective, I don't think there can be any argument that this country is a secular country. Now, I've always argued this. If you don't want it to be a secular country, that's fine. That is the right of every single citizen to want whatever kind of government that they want. I will never, ever stand in the way of anyone who says that Malaysia should not be a secular country and Malaysia should be an Islamic state or should be a Hindu state or should be a Buddhist state. I don't care. Whatever you believe, it is your right to believe it. It is your right to campaign for it. It is your right to fight for it if you want, without slapping people and stuff. Right? It is your right to want the kind of government, to want the kind of country that you want to live in and to push for it, to campaign for it. All right? But to say that this country is not secular is wrong. If you have aspirations towards it, live up to your aspirations, but do not lie and say that it is an Islamic state, because it is not. Then people ask me, what about all this, if you say it's secular, then there has to be a complete split between state and religion, because that's one of the common interpretations or definitions of a secular country, where church and state are separate. Well, yeah, that's true. You have things like the Sharia court, of course. We have government religious bodies like Jawi, Jakim, the Fatwa councils. These are bodies which are religious in nature, but at the same time are part of the state machinery. So how can you say it's a secular country? Well, I argue that it's a secular country because all these institutions, and all the Sharia laws that are made in this country, all right, theoretically at least, they are limited by the Constitution, which is a secular document. So the laws that are made in the state legislative assemblies, the Sharia laws which are made in the state legislative assemblies, the activities of Jawi and Jakim, etc., the activities of the Fatwa Council, they are all limited by our Constitution, and they cannot exceed the Constitution. So, for example, if these activities breach the religious freedoms of people in this country, then it is unconstitutional. And let me remind you, Article 4 very clearly states that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. But this is not so. And we can see that happening every day in this country, where the rights that we have, which are protected by the Constitution, are overridden by religious authorities, by religious courts. And I'm wondering why. Why did this happen? How did we develop in this way? And I would argue that it's because of political expediency. The powers that be understand the kind of resonance which religion has You know, and I've always stated that the danger of mixing religion and politics is that, or religion and law, for example, and it happens so often here, is that, you know, if I was to criticize the Contracts Act, no one would say anything to me. Right? If I was to say the Contracts Act is a really awful law, man, it's awful, you know, get rid of it, no one would say anything to me. But if I was to say that the Sharia Offences Act, Federal Territories, 1982, is an awful law, you know, it's, hey, who the hell are you? I'm a citizen, man. This law applies to me. And I have a right to criticize it. But somehow, because it's the Sharia Offences Act, I cannot say anything. That doesn't make sense to me. That's not democratic. That is not democratic at all. It doesn't respect my rights as an individual, as a human being, as a citizen of this country. Overall, the loss of any sort of principle, the loss of the idealism which is encapsulated in our Constitution, which protects us, which protects all of us, which protects the secularity of this country, has led, in my point of view, to oppression. It has led to anti-intellectualism, and it has led to anti-religious freedom for everybody. One view, and only one view, is allowed in this country, and it is unquestionable. And I will talk about this later in the later sessions, you know, where you cannot question the fatwa. Our law says you cannot question the fatwa. Mustafa said that, you know, during the Prophet's time, peace be upon him, people were questioning the Prophet. No, our fatwa council is higher than the Prophet. For me, it's the reason why things are so messy, so disgraceful, is because if you control people's minds, then you control people. And this is what the political powers that be want. And therefore, they will use anything at their disposal to achieve that, including using religious, so-called religious principles, so-called Islamic principles. Which is why we have muftis like Harul Sani saying, it is okay to kill protesters against the government. Their blood is halal. Yes? Mufti of Perak. You know, I think most of us here are Malaysians. You don't need me to go down all the examples of such terrible things being done in the name of faith. But I tell you why I'm a secularist. I tell you why it's so important to me. Partly because, like I said to you, during the course of my life, I've experienced spirituality in many forms, and I believe they all should be protected. Being a secularist does not mean I'm anti-religion. Being secularist means I am pro the freedom of people to be free, to choose what they want to choose, to be what they want to be, to find peace in whatever way they want to find peace. One of my friends quit the law, and he became a pastor in Australia. And then on one of his visits back, you know, he meets up with me and he says, you know, asks me, do you mind if I say a prayer for you? And I said, of course not. Of course not. Just now, literally, as I was sitting there, I get news on the phone that one of my students has just passed away this morning. And he was a very special boy. He was severely disabled. He could only move his hand basically, and he would type. He was writing his master's dissertation, and I was I was supervising him, and he could type only one word at a time using a mouse. It was a slow, arduous, painful process for him to complete it. And he did complete just. It hasn't been submitted yet, but he just completed it, and then he passed away this morning. And I want to go to his service. I want to pay my respects to him and his family within the context of his religious faith. And I do not want anyone to tell me that I cannot. I do not want anyone to tell me that somehow I am less of this and less of that, because I choose to respect my student who has died in the way that his faith demands. This is why secularism is important. Thank you very much.